Hey guys, so before we get started with the review, let's go over a few things about my partnership with the Flute Center of New York. I make one of these flute reviews with the Flute Center of New York every month. So no worries, my code works with almost every single flute that the Flute Center of New York sells, with a couple of very rare exceptions. If you use my code JAF, you will be able to get yourself a couple of perks when you order flutes from the Flute Center of New York. 1, you get free domestic shipping within the US. 2, you get an extended 10-day trial, usually it's only 7 days. 3, you get an extended 18-month warranty on your new flute. And 4, you can have trials for up to 3 instruments at a time. Just to be transparent, I do earn a commission on each flute that is purchased using my code through the Flute Center of New York. I will put links to the Flute Center of New York's website and contact info in the bottom bar below in case you want to ask them to take flutes out on trial. Just keep in mind that you need to be in the market to actually buy a flute before you take flutes out on trial, because if you're not in the market to buy, this doesn't help anybody. The Flute Center of New York does price match any authorized dealers, so rest assured you will get the best deal. When trying flutes, make sure you take off all rings and dangly jewelry that can potentially scratch the flute. Never use the polishing cloth, the swabbing cloth, or the cleaning rod that comes with each new flute, because they are not yours yet. And just a quick disclaimer, each flutist plays each flute differently, so my job is just to describe to you how these flutes play, and it's up to you to decide for yourself which flute will work for you. It's just like in Harry Potter, just as the wand chooses the wizard, so the flute chooses the flutist. Alright, and now let's get straight into the review. Today we will be reviewing 2 of the most requested flutes since I started making these videos with the Flute Center of New York. They are the Powell Conservatory Silver and Arrowmite flutes. In this video, I wanted to feature 4 of their head joint cuts: the Lumina, Venti, Philharmonic, and Soloist cuts. I wanted to show you guys how broad their range of head joint cuts are. As tradition, let's first talk about the cases. So there is a couple of really interesting things about this case. One is the cover itself. So yes, it has a lovely sort of embossed detailing here with the Powell logo. But what I find particularly interesting about this cover is that the zipper does not end where it traditionally ends here. It actually goes further down the side of the case. So when you open it all the way up, the lid part of the case folds open completely, which makes it a lot easier for you to actually open the case up. There are many other cases in which this is not the case. Everything lays flat and there's no risk of your actual case accidentally popping out of the cover. When you're taking your flute out, your case is open. So if your case pops out, your flute is gonna pop out with it. I've had many mini heart attacks, just kind of catching and saving my flute. So I like this idea. On top, there's no extra pocket here, right? And I was like, wait, what? Now what I discovered upon closer inspection was that there's actually a hidden compartment here on the inside, albeit a smaller pocket than your traditional case pocket that is on the outside. So on the inside here, it comes with a small swabbing cloth, a very thick polishing cloth, and your typical wooden cleaning rod. And then there is a little card that welcomes you to the Powell family. So first on our list of flutes to review is the Powell Conservatory Silver Flute. Powell Handmade Conservatory Flute in sterling silver. 0.925 sterling silver hand cut head joint, sterling silver body and mechanism, Powell pinless mechanism, drawn tone holes, silver rings, ribs and posts, French open hole model, pointed key arms, white gold springs, Straubinger pads, 0.016 tubing, modern Powell scale, offset G, C sharp trill key, split E mechanism, D sharp roller, B foot joint, handmade in the USA. The head joints that we will be reviewing on this flute will be the Lumina cut, sterling silver, 0.925 tube and lip plate, 14 karat riser, 0.016 standard wall tubing, Lumina cut, as we said, handmade in the USA. And the other head joint that we will be reviewing on this flute is the Venti cut, sterling silver, 0.925 tube, lip plate and crown, 14 karat lip plate gold riser, 0.016 standard wall tubing, Venti cut, as we said, handmade in the USA. I wanted to sort of showcase how different the silver flute can sound with just different head joints. Let's start with the Lumina cut. The shape of your air that is spinning in your mouth while you play is egg-shaped. But the weird part is that the wider end of the egg is not pointing towards the back of your mouth. It's actually at the front of your mouth. You want to pretend that you have punctured a hole on the wider end of the egg, and you are blowing your air through that hole. And in order to keep a really rich sound through all the registers, you have to kind of tilt the egg up and down. Lower notes go this way, higher notes go this way. And you see how the whole thing tilts like this? So because you are doing this tilting motion, it does require quite a bit of aggressive lipping to make that movement possible. And also because the wider base of that egg shape is at the front of your mouth, it is of utmost importance that you do not smash the flute against your chin, because you will end up cutting into that egg shape. So for the harmonics on this one, I found that I could actually squeeze out the 8th harmonic. Now, granted, I only squeaked it out once, and I just could not replicate it for this video for you guys. The harmonics on this thing are pretty bomb. Tone color is really interesting because I find that if you want a thinner sound, you actually kind of smash the egg in like this, but it retains this nice wide base here at the front of your mouth. And all you have to do to get that richer sound back out is to stretch that egg back out. Now for the mechanism, very light, very silky, very smooth. The only thing is that I noticed that just holding up the flute, I find that it's just very heavy. Really interesting though, because it is not actually heavy wall, it's standard wall tubing. And I do think it may have something to do with the fact that it is a pinless mechanism. I'll put a link up here to another review that I did that goes more into this whole pinless mechanism thing. So if you're curious about that, go check that out. Now for articulation. I find that for this flute, it's almost French tonguing, but not quite. The tongue is very far forward. It's primarily hitting the top front teeth, just grazing the bottom of my top front teeth. It's a very forward type of tonguing. Double tonguing also has to be extremely forward. You have to be very careful not to obstruct the airflow that you need to maintain that sort of egg shape. And now for dynamics. This egg shape that we've been talking about, you simply make it smaller for softer notes and larger for louder notes. The base of the egg does not stay up at the front. You want to take sort of your mezzo forte way of playing, and wherever the center point of that mezzo forte playing is, that's the center point for your smaller egg too, which means that the base of your egg kind of comes inward a little bit, and you'll feel that when you play. This way of playing softly is really interesting because it makes double tonguing when you're playing really soft really easy. Your tongue is in no way obstructing the area where that tiny little egg of spitting air is. So that means that playing something like the really famous flute excerpt from the Midsummer Night's Dream ends up being quite amazingly, fantastically easy on this flute. I did try it out on my own. I'm not going to play it here because copyright issues on YouTube. You know, Powell, you're doing something real good for us flute players. So now let's talk about the venti cut on this same Powell Conservatory silver flute. The Flute Center of New York actually sent me more head joints than what I'm showing you right now, but I decided to kind of show you guys the extremes of what they sent me. This head joint can withstand a lot of air going into it. I find that even my embouchure hole is actually larger. You still do get that tilting motion of the egg to get to all the different registers. But in this case, the egg shape is not quite as defined in your mouth as the Lumina. It just kind of has this overall feeling of a little wider in the front and a little bit more narrower sort of in the middle to 2/3 way into your mouth. So now for harmonics. I can half squeeze out the 8th harmonic, but not with the same clarity as when I cracked it out on the Lumina. Again, I could not replicate this when I was filming this video. Now, I don't think this is because of resistance though. It's simply because this flute takes just that much more air than the Lumina does. Now, for tone color. Again, we're taking that sort of vague egg shape that we've got going on inside of our mouth for our spinning air. Now, what I find for tone color on this head joint is that you actually narrow down the base, the wider base of the egg for a thinner tone, and then you widen it up again for a richer tone. On this head joint, you are tonguing on the roof of your mouth, just a little ways in from your top front teeth. So kind of like the Yamahas, which I was really surprised by. Now, double tonguing on this flute is really interesting because since you're tonguing on the roof of your mouth at this point, there's not actually much room to get a very convincing K sound out when you're double tonguing. So I found that I ended up doing more of a duh-ga. And a ka kind of forces your tongue to go way in the back of your mouth and it comes all the way up. So if you do a more of a duh-ga, it keeps your tongue further forward in your mouth. It doesn't let your tongue go all the way back. So I actually found that that made my double tonguing lighter and actually cleaner. All right, and now for dynamics. When you want to play soft, your entire airstream narrows down into the shape of like a pencil with the sharp end pointing to the back of your mouth. In order to get louder notes, you grow that egg shape back to the original egg shape, and you can actually make it even bigger. If you make it even bigger, it means that you also need to widen your embouchure to let more air out. And by letting more air out, you will actually make your tuning go a little bit sharper simply because you're pushing so much air in. So you just have to kind of compensate by directing the air further down a little bit. So now for the Powell Conservatory Arrowmite flute. Arrowmite actually means that it's silver on the inside, and then there's actually a layer of gold that is bonded to it on the outside. So it's not an alloy, it's actually 2 layers. I did notice that this flute was also pretty darn heavy. Gold is actually heavier, plus it's a pinless mechanism. And before we forget, let's look at the specs. 9-carat Arrowmite body with sterling silver mechanism, Powell pinless mechanism, drawn tone holes, silver rings, ribs and posts, French open hole model, pointed key arms, white gold springs, Straubinger pads, .016 standard tubing, modern Powell scale, offset G, split E mechanism, C sharp trilogy, D sharp roller, B foot joint, handmade in the USA. And the 2 head joints that we'll be looking at with this flute are the Arrowmite Philharmonic cut and the Arrowmite Soloist cut. So the specs for the Arrowmite Philharmonic cut is 9-carat Arrowmite tube, 9-carat lip plate, silver riser and crown, .016 standard wall tubing, Philharmonic cut, as we said, handmade in the USA. And the Arrowmite Soloist head joint specs are 9-carat Arrowmite tube, 9-carat lip plate, silver riser and crown, .016 standard wall tubing, Soloist cut with gold wings, and handmade in the USA. So first we are going to be trying out this Arrowmite flute with the Philharmonic cut. So again, this head joint utilizes that sort of egg shape inside of your mouth, but this one is also more of a vague shape rather than the super defined shape that I felt in the Lumina. This cut can also withstand a lot of air. I did also notice that the egg is not placed as far forward in your mouth, it's actually placed a little bit further back. Now for harmonics. It's kind of similar to the venti cut where it just takes a lot of air. There is actually fairly little resistance in these head joints. I actually wonder if one of the reasons why it can withstand that much air is because the flute itself is so sturdy and heavy. Now for tone color. Very similar to the Lumina with regards to flattening the egg this way, but with the addition of actually flattening the egg kind of this way too. Just make sure that you don't flatten it this way too much because you will also lose volume. As for the mechanism, same deal, very light, very smooth, silky, amazing. It's just that the flute itself just feels incredibly sturdy and heavy. Now for articulation. For me, I find that the tongue is primarily hitting the back of my top front teeth while barely grazing the roof of my mouth and the bottom of my front teeth. So it's not as far down as the Lumina. Double tonguing on this head joint is definitely a sort of lighter, lazier tuck. The cut is very far forward in your mouth, and you almost feel like you're creating the ka sound very low down in your mouth. And by doing this, you will be able to keep the resonance in all of the registers. All right, so now for dynamics. To get softer notes out, you want to reduce the size of your egg to that of like a tiny teardrop in the center of your mouth. And for louder notes, you want to expand it back to the larger egg. And again, just remember to tilt the egg for the appropriate register that you're playing in. And now for the soloist cut on the Powell Conservatory Aramite. This one surprisingly feels very similar to the Venti, but the sound is warmer and it can withstand even more air. Wings typically help direct and focus your airstream more, so I'm wondering if that is the reason why you can actually put in even more air without having your tones suffer. That egg shape inside of your mouth is extremely fuzzy and vague for this particular head joint. Now for harmonics. Again, there is not much resistance at all for the harmonics, but it's simply because they take so much air. So if you put in a lot of air through your flute, you're gonna really enjoy these flutes. For tone color, again, is this sort of flattening the egg mentality, with the addition that when you want to get a super rich sound, you kind of want to actually dip the base of the egg, which is like the wider end of the egg, in the area behind your bottom front teeth. You actually want to hollow that part out. That'll create a really big resonant sound for you. Conversely, if you want a really thin sound, you do want to kind of flatten it up a little bit too. So very similar to the last head joint that we were talking about. For single tonguing, you are very, very lightly grazing the tip of your tongue against the roof of your mouth, about a third to halfway in, depending on how big your mouth is. You have to make it very, very light in order for it to come out really clean. And I'm wondering if it's because this flute can take so much air that I'm guessing it actually emphasizes everything that you do with your tongue even more. In the same manner, double tonguing is also extremely light, but I don't find that I have to go all the way to a dugga. It's kind of in between a tucka and a dugga. It's like a very lazy tucka. Dugga, 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 kind of like that. And lastly, dynamics. Like the Philharmonic cut, for these softer notes, you want to create that sort of tiny teardrop shape, but placed even further back in your mouth than on the Philharmonic. And for louder notes, you want to, again, expand your egg back out to its big, big shape. But for this cut, you can go even bigger than on the Philharmonic cut. You can go all out. This flute will be able to withstand that. And now for the prices of these flutes. The specific configuration I have going on in this particular video, this conservatory silver is $10,210. I know. We are really getting up in the prices here. The Lumina head joint in this review costs $680 with the purchase of a conservatory or handmade silver Powell flute. Alone, it is $2,150. The silver venti cut that I reviewed in this video is $1,950 with the purchase of a new silver Powell flute. Alone, it is $3,370. So now moving on to the conservatory Arumite flute that we reviewed in this video. This one costs $13,040. The Arumite Philharmonic head joint that we reviewed in this video costs $1,810 alone. This particular head joint is actually included in the purchase of a new Powell Conservatory Arumite flute. And now for the last one. The last one was the Arumite Soloist flute that we covered in this review. That one is $600 with the purchase of a new Powell Conservatory Arumite flute. Alone, it is $2,350. So if you guys want to try out these flutes, make sure you go on over to the Flute Center of New York's website to look at their contact info and contact them about it. Let us know in the comments below what other flutes you want us to review. Make sure you follow the Flute Center of New York on their Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I will put all the links to their social media down in the info box below. And if you like this video, make sure you give me a big thumbs up and hit subscribe for new videos every Saturday. My last video is over there, and if you want to catch me during the week, my social media networks are down there. But otherwise, I will see you guys next week. Bye. I've been talking for so long, my mouth is actually dry. And I have no water. Great.